that $400,000 gain was able to roll that into $1.3 million next investment.
Yeah. And what's really cool, I find, is that, Lisa did this with 0% down when she first purchased the property. Yeah. So let me make that clear. All she did was pay mortgage payments on a $300,000 property and then sold the property for almost $700,000 and sure had a bunch of equity there beyond the $400,000 price appreciation for a 0% investment.
Right.
Yep.
Think about that for a second. Can you do that in the stock market?
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Maynard Wagner. I'm the team leader of the Wagner Real Estate Group at RE/MAX Northwest here in Seattle. And I'm pretty excited to deliver what I hope is some valuable content for you guys. You've probably watched a lot of our videos, but we're going to do our very first podcast, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We're just going to have a casual conversation. I've got my partners here, Justin Day and Michael Dapper, and we're going to take you on a journey. We've got a very special guest. We're going to talk about buying that very first property as a first-time home buyer, converting that into a rental down the road while you're buying a new primary residence, selling that rental property, and converting it into a 1031 exchange for an amazing Airbnb property. So we hope you enjoy it. Again, this is the first time we're doing this, so we don't have a name for this podcast. If you have any ideas, let us know. We'd like to come up with something that is attractive and makes sense, and we look forward to doing more of these in the future.
Can I come up with a suggestion?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we call it the Badass Real Estate Agent Podcast. I don't know if I'm just making that up, but
Nice.
Yeah.
anyways.
Why not? Why not? There's suggestion number one.
Perfect. Well, yeah, I'm Justin Day. Obviously I love being part of this team, and you guys are kick-ass. And Lisa, thanks for coming today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
First podcast, exciting.
Absolutely.
I'm Michael Dapper. I'm the another agent on Maynard's team, and we're excited here today to talk with Lisa about her kind of real estate journey and how her investments have worked out for her.
Lisa, why don't you tell us a little bit about your initial journey of buying your home, your original home that you purchased?
Sure. It was back in 2003, and it was super exciting. I was looking for the first starter home for myself and my son, and bought a little townhouse in Magnolia. It had a fence. We could buy a dog. That was a lot of the motivation behind it. And it was just such a great place. We had so many good memories there, lived there for 13 years. Eventually it outgrew our needs, or our needs outgrew the house. But
sounds kind of familiar to a lot of people we know, doesn't it?
Yeah. So a good question is, when you bought that first property, did you know exactly what you're doing? Did you have a perfect plan in place? Did you have it all figured out and knew what you're going to do in the future?
Oh, absolutely not. I was a first-time buyer. I had never met with an agent before. He had to explain the whole process end to end for me. We looked at a bunch of different places so we could figure out what my budget could actually buy. Initially, I was looking in another neighborhood, but then I ended up with, in Magnolia through his guidance and just going through the process.
Yeah, awesome. That's like what many first-time home buyers go through, right? Is they have a lot of questions and they don't know exactly where to start. But I think the point is, you just get started, right? There's a lot of fear, a lot of questions, and hopefully, what our team is here for is to help you through that, when it comes to what should I be thinking about, what's the process for buying a home. So I think the exciting thing, right, about this story is that when she bought in 2003, pretty sure she didn't expect the market to crash in 2007 or 2008, did you?
No, absolutely not. And it was terrifying. But at the same time, I really didn't need to move. And so we were just happy being where we were, and rode that through. And then it was nice to see the appreciation.
Nice.
After
Lisa,
that.
Can you remember even before you met that agent and talked to the agent about, the home buying process, where was your mindset at that made you want to decide, okay, I want to purchase real estate in the first place?
It's a good question. Some of my friends had just purchased, I was a young professional a few years into my career. Some of my colleagues had just purchased their first place. Honestly, I had zero down. It was back in the age of subprime loans. And I guess just kind of watching them and what they could do, that sparked an interest for me. And like I said, wanted to get the dog for my son. So yeah, one of my colleagues just made the introduction to the agent for me. And honestly, like, I felt so much more relieved once I met with him when we started the process. I think I was more apprehensive just thinking about it.
So what was it that kind of calmed down the situation for you? Like, obviously you felt apprehensive, you didn't feel comfortable, but then what did that agent do to kind of help you kind of reset?
Well, I mean, just helping me understand the process. Also, you know, it was a big obligation, and I'd never had a mortgage before, right? But then he was just assuring me, like, like market value appreciation and just all the upside potential that had for me.
Sure.
That's perfectly understandable that you don't have all the answers. That's pretty much what we see quite often, right? And then the other thing is, did you have a ton of money saved, and did you have a ton of cushion when you decided what your affordable mortgage payment was?
No, it was pretty limited. So I remember, initially just scaling down some of my other expenses so that we could make that mortgage payment. But, you know, I was motivated to do it, and I knew that was the right investment for my money long term.
Yeah, and then the right decision for you personally.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So,
for our lifestyle.
Yeah.
And also as just a personal investment, but right, it was lifestyle driven mostly.
Were you thinking at that moment when you decided to buy in Magnolia, were you thinking, I'm going to hold this and eventually rent it out as an investment, or were you just thinking primary residence?
Absolutely not. I was just happy to be in a home. I wasn't thinking I would be at this place financially where I could then have a second home.
I just want to get by.
Yeah, exactly. I started taking the bus instead of parking downtown, you know, for a period of time just to be able to do it. But I'm so happy. It was the best decision.
I hear that from a lot of first-time home buyers, especially. They're really not sure, kind of, you know, whether or not they should really stretch their budget. And I think what they always find is that after a little while, they realize that I can actually afford more 5 years from now than I can right now, and it actually makes a lot more sense to just kind of push yourself in the short term, and then, you know, it becomes that much more comfortable as time goes on.
So true.
And then, you know, all of a sudden, you end up with that much more equity at the end of the day. So.
I remember too when, because it was a subprime loan initially, and I think I had 2 years where I couldn't prepay it, right? But then I wanted to refinance it once we got past that, and like the market value had gone up, and I was so excited I could take a cash out refi to get a little bit of, you know, that's what it had brought.
Yeah. Well, and then obviously your career changed.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know, you were able to
make more money, and
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And
that
just felt more comfortable.
Right. Absolutely.
So I don't know if, you know, everyone out in the world knows what your story is, though. So you obviously purchased this primary residence for you and your son and your dog. And, you know, what was the next step in the journey there?
We just enjoyed life there, you know, like I said, for 13 years. And then our family needs expanded and grew. And so identified a new great place to move. And we're fortunate that we were able to actually just, like, looking at the market and what rents were, I was able to hold on to that initial property and have net positive cash flow of over $1,000 a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we're going to let you in on a little secret here for those of you that don't know. But, you know, that person who ended up buying that new house, you know, because we needed more space, that was me and Lisa. So
Yeah. I needed more space because Maynard and his daughter came in the picture. Yes.
Exactly, right? So that probably wasn't planned when you bought that first place in 2003.
No, absolutely not.
And most importantly, how did Maynard compare to that first great agent?
Well, his commission was better. No, just kidding.
There's no commission when you work with a buyer's agent.
I know.
Let me be clear about
I
that.
know. It was great because we had unlimited access to the new house during the pending period.
Yeah, so that's pretty funny. So Lisa and I, have bought a couple, 1, 2, 3 properties together right now, right? So we're talking about going from Lisa when she bought that first property to Lisa and I buying that, new home together. And that was in 2015, and that was in January 2015. And so Lisa was very fortunate to have a real estate agent who was working full time, could identify opportunities and properties that were amazing to purchase. Isn't that how it happened?
Well, that's your version. Actually, I found the property. Everyone assumes that it was because Maynard is a real estate agent, but I was the one who pushed him to go look at this place. Of course, it was above the original budget, so probably had something to do with it. But
Yeah, story of my life, above budget.
Above budget. Exactly.
like Justin was saying, stretch your budget. You don't regret it later, right?
Well,
Absolutely.
I do think that's
Touché.
a good point, though, because I mean, with our team, we meet a lot of first-time home buyers, and the question of affordability and what can I afford is usually, one of the first questions that we try to answer and help them, getting them in contact with the lender. But the idea being that depending on where they're at in their arc of their career, their income's going to be going up. So if they can afford the mortgage in the first month, it's only going to get easier after that. So you made some personal sacrifices to make sure that made that happen for you. And then it became a non-issue.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Because, I knew my career trajectory and believed in myself, right? And that I would be making more money as I went. And you're right, it would become a lot easier.
Good job, Maynard.
Oh, man, that's funny. There might be more secrets revealed in this conversation, TBD, so we shall see. So here we are, right? We are renting your first property, right? So this is your first Magnolia property. We ended up buying a new property that we lived in. And part of this story, right, is the initial property that, you stretch yourself to get in, and then, there's some steps in between. But at some point, right, you've thought, okay, I feel like it's time to sell this rental property.
That's right.
And despite it being a cash flowing property for some period of time. So tell us more about that.
Sure. So we had it as a long-term rental for about 5 years. And like you said, cash flow positive the whole way, and rents kept increasing. My mortgage did not increase, right? So that delta was even a little bit better as time went on. And it saw some great market value appreciation also during that time. But I think at some point just kind of started thinking, hey, this property's had its heyday, and we'll keep going up, but maybe not at that same trajectory, and that there were other opportunities in the market relatively that might be better to capture appreciation. And then the other factor for me personally was like my mortgage was pretty low because I had bought it so many years ago. And my LTV at that point was below 40%. And as an investment, I'd like to see that a little higher so we could increase the return. And so the goal there was to sell the property, take the gains. I think I'd originally bought it for $300, and then it was about $700,000 when we sold it, so $400,000 worth of gains, and take that and lever that up. And as an investment property, you need to put 30% down. So,
and for everyone who doesn't know, what does LTV know?
Loan to value. So my mortgage value relative to the market value of the house, and so as an investment property, you can increase your return, by utilizing other people's money, right? So that was kind of part of the goal. The next step was to do that, and that $400,000 gain was able to roll that into $1.3 million next investment.
Yeah, and what's really cool I find is that Lisa did this with 0% down when she first purchased the property. Yeah. So let me make that clear. All she did was pay mortgage payments on a $300,000 property, and then sold the property for almost $700,000, and sure had a bunch of equity there beyond the $400,000 price appreciation for a 0% investment.
Right.
Yep.
Think about that for a second. Can you do that in the stock market?
Right. And was seeing positive cash flow monthly during that time as well.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, it's a no-brainer. I actually just had a conversation with some friends who are thinking about purchasing a home in the long term, and we were talking about the different benefits of just buying in general. And that was the big thing is everyone I think has this idea that they need to put down 20% on a place. Mm-hmm. You don't need 20%. You don't even need 10%. You don't even need 5%. To get a conventional loan in this market, you need 3% at a minimum. And even just the 3%, let's say you have a $500,000 place, 3% is what, $15,000 So for a $15,000 investment on a $500,000 place, well, 2 years from now, if that place is worth $550,000, Well, that $30,000 investment just turned into a $50,000 profit, which is nothing but a positive. So I think it's just something important to make sure that we make that clear, that that's obviously a huge benefit to what you did.
Right.
I also think it's a good point to make that Lisa has a background in finance. So,
Therefore the LTV, right?
No way.
Right,
No
that's
way.
where that LTV
I don't think that came
flew out of
across.
there.
So.
But I mean, so this isn't, this is somebody that is aware of other investment vehicles, right? So still choosing real estate as part of that kind of portfolio. There's certain benefits to real estate that you can't get out of investing in stocks or directly in the market.
Right. And that's a good point. When I chose to sell the townhouse, the original townhouse, I had $400,000 gain, right? And it's like, well, what do I do with this? I could cash it out and put it in my brokerage account and pay taxes on it, capital gains taxes, which would have been about $80,000. Or do I redeploy that into a new real estate asset and utilize the 1031 like-kind exchange opportunity to defer those taxes? So that's what we chose.
So maybe not Lisa, Maynard, why don't you tell us a little bit about what a 1031 exchange is?
Oh, geez, I'm on the spot here.
Ba-dum-bum.
Yeah. So a 1031 exchange allows you to defer the capital gains of an investment property if you take those gains and reinvest it into another investment property. So an example would be in this case, right? She had a $400,000 gain. If you just cashed out, you'd have to pay capital gains taxes. So if the tax rate was 20% on capital gains, then you're paying $80,000 on that $400,000 gain. Not bad, right? You're still making $320,000. However, you can keep levering that up, putting it from a 1031, putting it from a lower investment property into a bigger investment property. And this is how people accumulate from a little residential home into a duplex, into a triplex. So in this case, the financial decision was to sell the Magnolia property here in Seattle and then buy an Airbnb investment in Phoenix.
Right.
So taking that entire $400,000 gain and investing it into this new property in Phoenix.
And I mean, we were initially talking, well, if we did a 1031, what type of property would we want to go into? Maybe something else in the Seattle area. But then we started to think, too, we're just at this new phase in our life. Like, my son isn't little, we don't have the dog, that we're just at a whole new phase, right? And so now we're empty nesters and we have more freedom to travel. And so this was just also a great lifestyle play for us, really.
I think one thing that keeps popping into my mind is the idea of diversification as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, that I think was a big part of the process for you guys in determining where you were going to purchase. But, it also just goes to saying, like, Michael was saying earlier on, but, just because, real estate is a fantastic long-term investment, that doesn't mean that you should put all of your eggs in one basket. I'm not saying don't invest in the stock market, don't do this, don't do that. I mean, it's just one vehicle that happens to have a really great return associated with it over the long run. So,
But you want to diversify, just like you want to diversify your securities that you hold.
Yeah. So Lisa and I, we own stocks. We have some real estate assets here in the Seattle area, and we thought buying in Phoenix would allow for diversification and location. But then Lisa, has family there. We've got friends there. Our primary goal right now is to create an Airbnb investment that is cash flow positive, that is giving us a good return. But because it's an Airbnb, it gives us the flexibility to go down there every once in a while. And who knows what may hold, what our future holds down the road, right? We may be, living there more often than we currently are. So
that doesn't suck.
No, it doesn't.
No,
Cool.
Not at all. So was selling your property primarily purely financial driven?
With the original townhouse?
Yeah.
No, not necessarily. I mean, it was actually, that was the primary, to be able to get into something that I felt had more market value upside, as well as relever. But I think I was, just ready to close the chapter on that initial home that I'd bought and move on.
Yeah.
And this was a new lifestyle, new chapter for us.
Yeah, I understand that completely. For those who don't know, I'm originally from Canada, and so I had a rental property that was our original primary residence in Canada, and we owned the house for 2 years before we moved down here to Seattle. And we kept it as a rental property for 14 years, almost 14 years. And we decided to sell it this past spring. And a big part of the reason was it was cash flow positive, just like what you described. You know, we had been continuing to gain equity in the property, but I think at a certain point we felt it had run its course, and maybe for a different reason. I mean, I think for us it was partly because we were dealing with a rental property in a different country, but at the same time I still feel like, you know, my level of passion towards this property was not nearly what it used to be. And so I was like, you know what, it's not worth the hassle.
Yep.
And so I wanted to, you know, do something else with the resources. So
Absolutely.
yeah. And that's not saying I'm not going to buy another property, but
Maybe not in Canada, though.
Well, it's not going to be in Canada. And the worst part is I didn't have the opportunity for a 1031 exchange, at least not from what my understanding is. So I did have to pay the capital gains, which, you know, is not ideal, but
Right.
yeah.
So what made you then, if you already have experience with, you know, renting rental properties, what made you want to do an Airbnb instead?
I mean, I think for me, it was just, I've enjoyed utilizing them myself, and it was an opportunity where, you know, our jobs, our life is up here in Seattle. We're not ready to move full-time to a place like that. We can't afford a whole second vacation home on our own right now. You know, that would be great if we could, and it just sat there. But this was an opportunity to just kind of start dipping that foot into a new lifestyle investment slightly, you know, and building it up. And like Maynard said, we don't have the flexibility down the road to utilize it more ourselves. And I mean, we also had a great agent that Maynard referred us to down there, who helped us, who kind of specializes in this area and helped us run the numbers and projections. And, you know, we didn't just pull the trigger without feeling like this was going to be profitable. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is another great thing about, you know, working with me as a badass experienced real estate agent, is I knew all the answers. I knew exactly how the Airbnb investment was going to work out. I've studied Airbnbs extensively, and I know exactly the process. So it was a very easy decision for us. Obviously, in jest there.
Yeah.
But, you know, buying and selling real estate, right, we're talking a lot about finance, but there's a big emotional aspect of it, right? So, you know, it's funny, right? So Lisa and I, you know, she made the decision we're going to sell her property. And I said, okay. And then, you know, once we made that decision, we did the steps to get it on the market, you know, and do all those things. We put some money into the investment to get it ready for sale. And then we actually did not have a decision on what to do. We kind of just didn't talk about it for 2 weeks. And next thing you know, we're going to close in 2 weeks. And we said, well, we should probably decide what we're going to do with this pretty soon here. Right?
Because we had 45 days from the close of the Magnolia townhouse to identify the new property for the 1031. That's the IRS requirement. So.
That's not very long.
No, it's not. So
yeah, so it's funny. We were at a time when we weren't ready to have that discussion. Yeah. And then we're 2 weeks away from closing, and it's a Monday. And I tell Lisa, I'm like, well, I guess we should probably talk about this sooner than later, shall we? You know.
It's funny because a while before, we had talked a little bit, and you're like, well, we could get a triplex in Bellevue, or, you know, we talked about a desert lifestyle at some point too.
Yeah. I mean, we've had these conversations, but we did, just to be honest, we did not make a decision right away. It wasn't a straight line, right? We were not experts in making decisions, and it wasn't all linear, right? We had emotion behind this whole process. So, you know, the cool thing is that when Lisa and I make decisions, we can make them relatively quickly when we're ready. So on a Monday, we talked about, all right, let's do something. What areas should we consider? So we go, okay, well, let's consider Phoenix for a lot of reasons: family, friends, diversification, nice weather, right? And then we go, okay, I know an agent down there, and he was actually a former client of mine here in Seattle, so we had somebody we trusted. We set up a call with him on Wednesday morning. He showed us properties on Thursday online, right? But he was great. He interviewed us and goes, what are the main reasons for this property, right?
Yeah.
So you can elaborate on that.
Sure. I mean, his process was really great. I mean, he asked us what the top few qualities were for us personally, like how we would like to use the place, and then also we developed criteria for what would make a good Airbnb. So, for example, on the personal side, I'm like, when I go there, I want to feel like I'm on vacation. You know, I want a backyard that feels nice and lush, and it's not just like a fence with a pool in it. You know, it doesn't, like, functional. Like, and So we came up with a few things.
Well, that's actually the perfect sign of a great agent, is someone who can understand what someone's motivation really truly is.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think he understood the timeline that you guys were on and trying to make that become reality. But at the same time, you know, understanding the details of like, okay, well, how do we want to utilize this property if we're going to buy in Phoenix? I mean, how is this going to have the biggest bang for its buck? So.
That's right. Yeah. And like, we love entertaining and hanging out with our friends, so we also wanted a place where we could go down with a few other couples and enjoy the weekend, and something that would be comfortable, you know, for adult couples to spend the weekend together.
Going down that slide.
Yes.
Going down the slide. Yes. So that's a lot of fun for sure. So anyway,
Maynard loves it.
Things can happen really fast. So he was great. On Wednesday, he presented some properties. He had a spreadsheet. Here is what makes it awesome as an investment. Here, based on what I heard you, here's what makes it awesome as a personal home for you. Mm. So we had this blended criteria with a wide price range, with my target on this lower end of the price range.
My target on the upper.
Target on the upper, and guess where we landed?
Upper.
Right.
Boom.
Boom. Yeah.
But still financially worth it.
Still obviously financially worth it, right?
So it still makes sense.
Emotionally and financially, you know, the right decision for us. And so again, things can happen pretty quickly when, you know, I guess when you feel confident and you want to move forward, but you still don't have all the answers. So Wednesday we look at properties. Thursday we have our pre-approval. Friday we make an offer. Sunday we're in contract.
Yeah.
So.
And then Monday he tells
After
us, we're like, what? Yeah.
It was a very stressful week, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But intense, but good.
Yeah, we had
Exciting.
a few counter offers back and forth.
It's funny because this is Maynard's work, right? And so I hear him all the time, like negotiating, and I understand, but like to be the client, right, and be in those shoes is live that emotion yourself.
Well, that's important for us, though, as real
really,
estate agents, is to kind of put ourselves in that situation because, you know, as you said, we deal with it every single day. Understanding what our clients go through and the emotional impact it can have on them is absolutely critical. I kind of have to pinch myself every day, making myself, you know, think about that on a more regular basis.
Yeah, I think it's always important to remember, like, you know, every little bit counts. That extra information that your agent was able to present to you, you know, positive, negatives, and they're two kind of different categories of importance, right? Mm-hmm. You know, it's a complex situation with a lot of different variables, but hearing that, you know, as an expert and as a veteran of this industry, that even with, you know, you having a finance background, you have a finance background, you both know real estate really well, you've got experience that you don't have every single answer, and sometimes you just got to pick a horse and go with it. And, you know, there's always a little bit of gray area in all of this, you know.
And there's been no stress at all.
Zero.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, perfect example. I mean, if you guys were experiencing the stress that our clients experience, just imagine having not had that background and that experience.
Exactly.
It's been a lot of fun getting this Airbnb ready, so it's Airbnb-able.
Yes. So it has furniture,
It has
beds.
furniture. You know, it's a pretty big house, 3,500 square feet.
Well, why don't you tell
Empty.
us a little bit about the unexpected things that have come up with regards to, like, you know, okay, we're purchasing, or you take this property, you sell it, you go and you know, have this 1031 exchange. Sure. You all of a sudden now have this property that you're under contract for, and you're like, oh, we don't have furniture, we don't have this, we don't have that. Like, what's the biggest thing?
Well, I mean, we had a project manager to help us kind of outline what's our time from close through when we think we can get it to be operational.
Just to clarify, that happened to be your real estate agent.
It did happen to be our Arizona real estate agent.
Which is awesome.
Yes, which was very, very nice.
Adrian Bell.
Yeah, I was going to say we should plug him
Adrian
now.
Bell.
Yeah. So we said, okay, 3 months we felt was a reasonable amount of time, right, to be able to get all the furnishing. And we had a few interior things we wanted to customize, I guess, a little bit, but nothing too extensive. But the COVID supply chain is real. Issues with that. Ordering furniture right now, you know, certain things on back order and delays. That's, you know, sometimes we had a vision of what we wanted and then had to backpedal because that wasn't exactly available, right? But
We have a spreadsheet.
Yep.
More spreadsheets. So
That's right.
That's what you got to do, you know. It's been a little bit more of a challenge too, because this is not just a pure investment property, right? So when we had the vision of what to buy, it's a lot easier if, I don't have any emotional attachment to the property. It is just going to be a pure investment.
Sure.
You make a financial decision, you invest, relatively low cost as much as possible, and then you start renting it. For us, it's very personal to us as well as investment related. So we're making a combination of decisions that we're probably spending a little bit more on the Airbnb investment than we would otherwise. So that's presented a challenge, but it's also fun, right? Because we want this to be that home that is emotionally, that we emotionally love as well.
Right. And it's our first time setting up or operationalizing an Airbnb, so we're learning a lot through the process as well. But having Adrian on board with us has been amazing to just kind of help us always put that lens of the Airbnb customer in place and help us guide our decisions.
So let me paraphrase what you're saying here. It's important to have a good real estate agent, someone who you can trust and you feel like can guide you through the process. And
yeah,
I mean, that's what I'm hearing here. So.
Right. I'm a real estate agent, and I hired a real estate agent I can trust. Right. So
right.
that's the key. It's not something you just kind of figure out on your own by researching on the internet and go for it. So. Yeah, here we are today. We still are not online. I think we're 1 day away from it, right?
We're 1 day away from it. Yeah.
We're what, 3 months away? 3 months since we closed,
We're
roughly?
just shy of 3 months. Yeah, so we're not too far off from the target, but yeah.
Do you have any expectations right now of how frequently it's going to be rented by other Phoenix homes and properties, or are you just kind of going to see what happens?
Well, it better rent, because that's the goal.
Well, no, of course it'll rent. But I'm saying, are you expecting it to be rented,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good consideration, right? Because we definitely do not intend to use it during the premium months. And in Phoenix, the premium months are January, February, March, right? And April as well. So our goal during this time frame is to come up with a price, that keeps it rented the most time. But we don't know for sure, right? We're looking at comps, we're researching what other Airbnbs are renting for. There's a couple different ways to look at this too, right? Is that you can go relatively low price on the rent and ensure it's rented for 30 days. Or you can go a little bit higher price, maybe rent it for 21 days, get the same amount of money, but then you have 9 to 10 days less wear and tear on the property. Mm-hmm. So I think we got to figure out that sweet spot, right? And we're not going to know it until we do it and experience it.
Yeah, you just got to dive in and go for it.
Yeah, that's yield management in a nutshell. I mean, I'm from the hotel industry in my previous world, and that's such a huge factor when it comes to determining what nightly rental rates are for just simply hotels. Airbnb, it's probably even more important.
Right. Well, and Adrian has hosted several other properties before, and so he's helping us with that pricing strategy as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great things is that we set a budget to determine how much we wanted to invest in this Airbnb, and because we're finance experts and professionals, we are way under budget.
Yeah, right. Doesn't matter. Human nature overrides that.
Right.
We've blown the budget, but
tastes are low.
Again, we're kind of making decisions as they go, right? Yeah, we're aware of it, and I think we set a pretty reasonable budget, but things again change. I think the point is, right, we didn't have all the answers, and it's not a perfect model, and sometimes you just gotta go for it and experience it.
But I think having that budget is super important up front before you dive in, because otherwise every single decision you will tend to go up. You know what I mean? I want the better one. And if you do that on every single thing, you're going to be way below the budget instead of just a little bit. So that helps guide what's really important.
Make it so. Make it so. Only so many times you can say make it so.
Yeah. But that's got to be really tough. I mean, you said it earlier, but for most people when they purchase an Airbnb, if it's intended to just solely be a rental, I mean, they just make it look presentable, and they maybe worry about wear and tear a little bit. But for you guys, it really was a challenge. And so did you guys feel like you were making some compromises with certain things and others or not with others? Or do you think you just kind of went simply to the what we'd like side of things?
I mean, I'm happy with the way everything's turned out for sure. So there's no regrets there at all. I mean, I think it's just like when you're online and you're shopping for the living room sectional, right? And there's this one, and which one do you decide, right?
Yeah, I'm happy to as well, just to be clear. I think the other thing to do is that, that as I'm thinking about, right, if you're someone who's like wondering, how do you decide on a market where you're going to Airbnb? For us, we had that, emotional connection to Phoenix, but we also felt very strong about the future investment prospects. So, some of the things to kind of know about, the Phoenix market is that there are a lot of people, moving into the area. The short-term vacation rental market is here to stay. So it's just going to be one of those, I guess, new ways of life, that is going to continue for some time. We're also starting to see in the Phoenix area, more foreign investment, and that hasn't been the case before. I believe there's a large semiconductor manufacturer from South Korea that is invested in the area. So there's a lot of factors that, make us confident that from an employment standpoint, lifestyle standpoint, it's going to be a good investment over time.
Yeah.
Even though we're investing a lot of money and we're net zero right now, or net negative, I should say.
Sure.
But, that's, I guess, the other thing that we considered as we decided, should we invest in Phoenix or not?
Right. We believed in the market.
We believed in the market, yeah.
Well, that kind of brings me to a good question here. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about the Airbnb concept and idea here in Seattle, because I think a lot of the people who are listening to this right now are probably people who have aspirations to do something maybe similar to what Lisa did, or maybe completely different scenario but still have the same goals. I think one thing that's really unique in Seattle, and maybe it's the case elsewhere as well, that Airbnbs are a challenge when you get into the condo market, because condos very much restrict Airbnbs. I'm not sure if that's the case in the Phoenix area or not, but that's where in Seattle here we do tend to see a lot of townhouses that are rented as Airbnbs and single family houses as well. Do you guys have any insight into I guess what you've talked to clients about, or what that may look like?
I mean, I've definitely talked to people that are really young people that are looking to buy their first property, but they're already thinking, when can I rent this out later, and can I Airbnb it? Are two big questions. And I think, sometimes those first time buyers are in a condo price range, but there's other opportunities out there. People are moving further out, especially still in King County, but being able to possibly build like an ADU and then Airbnb that and helping that pay for the mortgage that they're paying and currently living in their primary residence. So I think there's a lot of people interested in this concept.
Yeah, well, and to go a little bit further into that, I mean, you obviously have a lot of tech workers in the Seattle area. A lot of these people aren't necessarily thinking of Seattle being a place they're going to live for the next 15, 20 years. Maybe they're only looking at a 3 to 5 year stretch, but they want to take advantage of the market. And so really, the idea of a townhouse is really a perfect investment for those people, because, you're able to get something you can feel comfortable in. You can live there 3 to 5 years or whatever it may look like for you. And then you turn it into a rental investment property, like an Airbnb. So.
Yeah, or not an Airbnb. I think, we're talking about Airbnb, and Airbnb is very sexy right now, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to Airbnb, but it takes a lot of work because there's a lot of turnover. There's costs associated with it. You got to have your cleaners and a lot of people in place. So I think one thing to consider, especially if this is your, potentially your first investment property, is nothing wrong with a long-term rental,
That's right.
And that's often the safest first step, to do this. There are a lot of restrictions on short-term rentals because there are concerns from homeowners and cities and governments about too much turnover, too much short-term rentals. So, even here in Seattle, some of these townhomes that are here are restricted to short-term rental or restricted to long-term rentals, 30 days or more, while others, don't have restrictions. Condos in particular mostly have restrictions. When we bought the Airbnb house in Phoenix, we bought into a community with no homeowners association, because there's a lot of golf course communities and they have restrictions as well too.
Interesting.
So there's a lot of different factors to consider, but again, there's nothing wrong with a long-term rental.
Yeah, well, I mean, and to Lisa's point earlier, I mean, she was cash flow positive. I mean, you probably had very few headaches in the big scheme of things.
And we weren't like dead set on doing an Airbnb. You know, it just made sense for us in Phoenix and with kind of being a lifestyle play as well. But if we had bought something locally, good chance it could have been a long-term rental.
What's next on your list, Maynard Wagner?
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that, you know, again, for our first podcast, we're covering all the topics and questions that a lot of people have related to this whole, you know, experience. So I'm just looking at my notes here. Yeah, I think one of the topics is around, you know, is it today in today's market a good time to buy, and when's the market going to crash, and when are prices going to get better, right? So I think maybe the takeaway in this story is that Lisa bought her townhome and she experienced a real estate crash, right? Her property was less than what she paid for, because she held it long term. There was not an issue or problem, you know, with dealing with the crash. Real estate over the long term is always going to rise, and so that's one thing you can bet on.
So is there going to be a real estate crash now?
Not that I know of right now. So at least what we're looking at for next year, watch my video, Instagram, Seattle Realtor Maynard, so if you haven't seen it. But at least for next year, short-term prices are going to continue to increase, ranging anywhere from 8% on average to up to 17% for the most bullish people. So there you go.
Thank you.
That's your answer.
When that recession that we went through was fueled by home, like, securities that were backed by mortgages, right? So that was a unique recession that we went through it as well.
Yeah. I mean, a much different time, not just because real estate prices have been going up for a long time, so inevitably they got to go down. Over that time, you know, there were a lot of zero down loans, a lot of fake loans, a lot of fake mortgages. Right now, the lending requirements are very much more diligent regarding qualification. So again, there's nothing fundamentally that we see as a concern right now.
Yeah, I think the cool thing about this whole story is that this is you know, something that worked perfectly for you guys, right? There's a lot of great tidbits and things that people can learn from this, but at the same time, you got to really understand, you know, what makes the most sense for you as an individual. You know, I feel like, you know, there's a lot of knowledge in this room right now, and we kind of have a good understanding of where things could go for any one of us. But at the same time, I don't expect anyone who's listening here to have the same depth of knowledge that we do. And so it kind of sounds, you know, very normal to us, but at the same time, it's something that I think a lot of people just need to really look at it. I mean, whenever I'm speaking to new clients, I'm always looking at it from a very personal perspective. What does this person want to accomplish? What are their goals? There's no box that we're trying to fit into here.
Yeah, that's true. At each step, just kind of check in. Where are you at? Where do you want to be? Don't be afraid to pivot and
pivoting
head a new
is great.
direction.
Yeah, totally. Because I mean, you know, as we said right away, I mean, you were not envisioning ever using that property as a rental property. You were never envisioning, you know, turning it into an Airbnb in Phoenix. I mean, it's a pretty cool story.
1021 or 1031 or
Whatever it's
1041,
called.
you know, those terms were not a factor in the
Right.
first decision to buy a
They
property.
were not. Yeah. But it is cool. When I'm in Arizona, sometimes I look at that new house and I'm like, hey, this all started with my humble little townhouse. And
Right.
Yeah,
it makes me feel good. You know, there's a part of that old house in the new house.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of the emotional part of real estate is that, like, okay, you also said, you know, where you were taking the bus so that you could, you know, help pay for that first purchase, right? So, like, you go back to that and think, wow, you know, this, you know, decision that I made a long time ago is now continuing to pay me, you know, in multiple ways beyond just money. I think what a lot of people, you know, feel like they have to get everything figured out, and is this going to make sense for me for the rest of my life? And I think one of the things that we try to do with clients is really figure out, what are your goals, you know, in the foreseeable future, and how could this help you in the foreseeable future? Because you're not going to be in a position that you're going to know every single thing that you're going to do for the next 20 years, you know, but real estate can start making sense a lot sooner than that.
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea when Lisa and I first started dating that she was going to convince me that we needed to get a bunch of pavers, get sand delivered, build a patio, jackhammer the old one, hire people to help out, and
You're
basically
talking
do nothing.
Yeah.
So, you know, the yard was just grass and dirt, and then we built this patio that I would never do today, ever again. But at the time, sweat equity, labor, you know, very proud of it at the time, but I think it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
You just don't know. You know, you make different sacrifices, you make different decisions based on where you are in life.
Yeah, I said, hey, one day I was like, I wish the yard was had a patio, right? It's all grass. And Maynard goes, well, we can do that today. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, we could just lay some black tarp and then you throw the pavers on top. And I'm like, no, we have to excavate it, like gravel, all the drainage.
Love makes you do silly things, right?
Yeah. Well, and the patio was a big selling point when we listed
That's
your
right.
when we listed your townhome.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and your use of the property had changed as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, how you wanted to utilize it. So
yeah, we had barbecues. We put the barbecue too close to the siding, and then the siding started melting. So we learned through that, you know, lots of things that you just learn by, you know, being a homeowner.
that's
Well, I would say this is a pretty darn good podcast. PG, darn. So this was a lot of fun. Thank you, Lisa, for being our very first special guest.
Thank you.
Hope you guys got value out of it. Again, we look forward to doing this more in the future, and we need a name for this podcast. So we'll figure out a way to make it fun and have some kind of contest to name it, okay? All right, that's
Awesome.
it.
Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap.
Thanks,
All right.
Lisa.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.